Very good afternoon. In the earlier class, we have discussed about the EIA concept and types of EIA. Now we are going to discuss about environmental impact assessment methodology. First, what is methodology? Method. A method. It is a system of methods used in particular time or particular area of study or any activity called methodology. A methodology is a structural approach to identify and predict the changes of an action that is called EIA methodology. The changes are reflected to the sequence of any activity. The steps regarding the environmental issues, physical, chemical, and biological and socio-economic activities, issues reflect in the EIA methodology. The methodology used in process of quantifying the changes. There are many EIA methodologies are there. Comprehensive, selective, comparative, and objective. In terms of EIA methodology, process through which an environmental impact of a proposed developmental activity and evaluation of the developmental project. While undertaking environmental impact assessment, the interrelated socio-economic, human health impacts, and cultural impacts, all these are considered in the EIA methodology, EIA studies. In desirable EIA methodologies, based on the principle of equality and cost effectiveness of the EIA and different efficiency approaches related to EIA considered in the EIA methodology. These methodologies broadly divided into 4 methods: comprehensive, selective, comparative, and objective. In that first one is comprehensive. The recognize the intricate systems and complex interrelationship between the socioeconomic, cultural, and human health impacts. And next, selective. Impacts and eliminate as early as possible unimportant impacts. And third one is the comparative. Determine the environmental changes due to the activities in existing conditions before starting any developmental activity or any project is called comparative methodology. The fourth one is the objective methodology. It provides unbiased measurements because it is free from political and external influences. Next one is criteria for selection of EIA methodology. The criteria based on simplicity, budget, and time, and flexibility. These are the criteria for selection of the EIA methodologies. The simplicity. This methodology should be simple and based on available manpower. And it's based on background knowledge, available background knowledge. It can be adopted without much difficulty in this methodology. And budget and time. This methodology should be applied by small groups with appropriate budget, and it takes limited lifespan. And next, flexibility. The flexibility of EIA methodology should be flexible and allow the modifications when during the course of the study, during the EIA process, we can make changes in flexibility EIA methodology. Next, choosing a method, choosing an appropriate method. The EIA ranges from simple to complex. Different methodologies ranging from simple to complex require different kinds of data and several formats of data, different expertise involved in the EIA process, geologists and environmentalists, and other specialist expertise involved in the EIA process, and technological skills for their interpretation of the data. Their analysis produced the differing from precision and certainty of the levels of the EIA. All these factors should consider for selection of suitable methodology when choosing a EIA method. Next, objectives of the methodologies. There are many objectives to understand the nature and location of the project and possible alternatives. The surroundings of the particular location. When we study the EIA of particular location, understand the project, understand the location, and different possible alternatives if any modifications required in the project side. That is one of the important objective. And identify factors of analysis and assessment objectives. The different factors impact the specific project, and preliminary identification of impacts and scoping. The preliminary identification of impacts means the natural resources availability and pollution status of the area, and the forest cover, biodiversity. All these aspects we need to identify, study the impacts before starting the project. Next, baseline studies and evaluation in the absence of projects. The baseline studies covered the primary objects forests, resources, contamination sources, the minerals quality, and ambient air quality, water quality, all these study need in baseline studies. Next, prediction and assessment of impacts and alternatives comparison. Next, mitigation. If any negative adverse impacts are related to the location and the project, we need to take the mitigation measures before starting the project and monitoring impacts management. The monitoring should be needed before starting a project, and the impacts management on the environment related to the project. These objectives are needed to study before starting the projects. And methodology requirements. The practitioner faces vast varieties of unauthorized information that must be collected and analyzed in preparation of EIA report. The best methods are able to organize a large mass of heterogeneous data and summarization of the data and the aggressive data into smaller sets with least loss of information and display of raw data and delivered information in a direct, relevant fashion. The target of audience should be also be considered in the methodology. For example, if target audience are not educated, then use of color codes and size and color code and size use when people are uneducated. It should be used in figures and tables and major methodologies of environmental impacts. 5 major methodologies implemented before in EIA studies: ad hoc method, checklist method, matrix, networks, and overlays. These are the basic methodologies used for EIA. In that first one is the ad hoc method. This is a simple method. It is based upon the broad environmental impact. The method is very useful whenever time period is limited. It will use this methodology. When we lack of require scientific information, we use this ad hoc method. In such situation, EIA depends exclusively on background data and expertise and experience of the expertises. So this method is not recommended when more scientific methods are available, because it is a simple method based on background data only. It works. And there are another methods in ad hoc method, opinion polls from the public and expert opinions consideration. These two methods are also involved in ad hoc method. And some important advantages are there related to ad hoc method. It is very simple and easily understand because it is based on previous data, basic data. The experts also representatives from the EIA guide and basic environmental components consider in this ad hoc method. Next one is the checklist method. It is a standard method. Standard checklist of the types of environmental potential impacts. The potential environmental impacts considered in EIA. So it is the standard list method which may be associated with respective project. The environmental impacts associated with the respect projects. So we use this checklist method in this process. This list prepared with highly structured process and different approaches and involve importance with weighting factors to the environmental components and factors because ensure that no potential impact is overlooked. So checklists are very effective in impact identification and capable of spreading the awareness also. Regarding EIA, because it is the spreading of awareness is the attention for the respective peoples and surrounding residents of the location of the project. In this checklist should enable the identification of different impacts such as soil, water, and atmosphere condition, and different flora and fauna, and resources availability in the location, and recreation of the area, and cultural aspects in the respective area. All these are considered in the checklist method. A typical checklist might contain earth components, water, atmosphere, flora and fauna, land use, and recreation and cultural activities. All these are included in the checklist. When we consider the components of the earth, mineral resources, and construction materials, different soils, any background radiation, all the physical features of the area will considered in the earth, and water sources, surface water sources, and groundwater sources and groundwater quality, surface water quality. And surface water includes different rivers, lakes, major projects, reservoirs. If coastal area, coastal seas, these all are included in the checklist method. And atmosphere component as a component in the checklist method, quality of the gases, air quality, and climate temperature also considered in the checklist method. And flora and fauna. In flora, trees, shrubs, and different grasses and crops, agricultural crops, surrounding area, and aquatic plants, and the biodiversity of the floral biodiversity. And in fauna, birds, animals, including reptiles. In pond ecosystem, fish and shellfishes, benthic organisms, different insects, and endangered species of the location will consider in the checklist method as flora and fauna. And in checklist method, one of the important factor is land use. In land use, wetlands and forest, grazing agriculture, residential and commercial places, and industrial and mining area. All this considered in land use as checklist method. And another important factor is recreation. Fishing, boating, and hunting. All this considered in checklist method. Next one is the matrix method of EIA. The matrix method provides a framework for interaction between the project location activities and their environmental impacts. It can evaluate the degree of the impacts project activities on environmental resources. The activities impact on the environmental resources is the matrix method. It displayed the project activities and environmental characteristics, and it also calculate the cumulative direct, indirect impacts and interaction with the resources of the environment. And it is observed in two-dimensional checklist with an actions and environmental components. The impacts depend on the functions The preliminary identification of the impacts on the scoping level and comparative analysis of alternatives and impact assessments and presentation of the evaluation results. Next one is the networks method. It is identify the pathways of impact using the series of chains like networks between a proposed project, and an impacts. Series of impacts that may be triggered by the project actions, triggered by the project location. A systematic sequence actions with the environment. There are different advantages and disadvantages of network method. Integrated assessments and interrelationship between the causes and effects of the project and cumulative impact assessment, overall factors included, and it is difficult to distinguish and quantify the magnitudes of the particular environmental impacts. Next one is the overlay. Overlay method is developed in 1984. It is based on the transparent maps. The maps in that each layer represents spatial distribution of an environmental characteristic. The overlays method is a simple technique to display the impact areas because intensity of impacts can be presented by color coding. It is a effective visual aid and it is useful for documentation of environmental conditions before and after the project implementation. And in that, both physical and social aspects consider and easily to and it is easily to display. These are the major methodologies using in EIA methodology. The next one is the EIA of air environment. The air is the major component, environmental component. The EIA is a tool used to assess the positive and negative environmental impacts on the economic and social impacts of a particular project. The EIA used to predict the environmental impacts of the planning stage so that we can reduce the adverse impacts by taking decision making process. The air quality impact assessment. Air quality impact assessment is an important technique to determine relative contribution to ground level pollutants and concentration of specific and current future emissions. And the objectives of air quality impact assessment: providing technical information for EIA report preparation, and also it gives the air quality status to the concerning authorities. The air quality impact assessment, a choice of techniques which are applicable to a particular situation. The problem to be assessed in the EIA, the main objective is providing technical information of the air quality by assessing the data. Next, general concept of air quality impact assessment. The scoping of the project. In the scoping stage, identification of positive negative impacts assessed in the scoping stage of the project. The scoping impact the EIA study with significant environmental issues. In the scoping stage, clear definitions of the project and it provides the contaminants of the air at scoping level. The scoping is undertaken during the initial stage of the EIA because it set the boundaries, conditions of the project. The scoping identify the interactions between the project activities and impacting the environment and receptors. Public will consider in the scoping of the project. The process may be called as terms of reference, typically performed by the proponent. Who is proponent? Proponent is the owner. The proponent, together with the EIA developers or consultants in preparation of the project report. Next, general concept of air quality impact assessment. Characterizing and quantifying the emissions in the specific area of the project location. What are the emissions releasing into the environment by surrounding industries or any mining activity is available. That is considered in quantifying, characterizing the emissions and identify existing emission sources. If any activities or any project monitored before in that area, what contaminants released by the source of the industry or any activity, and defining the contaminants of potential concern, the potentiality of the components depending on the source, duration of the project, and based on the contaminant hazard. If we organized or established any solid waste management landfill in that area, the potential impact on the groundwater quality will consider in the EIA process. When the dumping site open burning process impact the air quality of the surrounding area, that is the potential concern of the project. And accounting spatial and temporal variability of the quality of the air and the movement of the air quality, air direction, and quantifying the emissions rate. Different emissions will impact on quality, air quality, difference in numbers, difference in emission rates. So environmental impact assessment, process of examining the anticipated direct, indirect impacts of a proposed project or an activity to determine the appropriate mitigation measures and monitoring programs. It is a tool for the environmental management and estimated air quality concentration, level of concentrations, spatial temporal variations of air quality, difference in concentration of air components, project specific baseline quality measurements, baseline quality before establishing the project, starting the project, and existing air quality without any project activity, and unavailable input data. And use of air quality assessment, modeling results, all these are impact the quality, general concept of air quality impact assessment, and characterizing and quantifying the emissions, identifying the emission sources and contaminants are released into the environment, defining the different contaminants of the potential impact on the environment, and quantifying the emission rates, temporal resolutions of the emission rates. These characters and emissions quantify the EIA report process. Next, ambient air quality monitoring. The general nature of any pollutant monitoring, it is a measure of time and spatial variability depending on the spatial variability and the duration of the contaminant present in the environment. Such measurements are required to satisfy the monitoring process that gives the required data and the program goal, such determining the population exposure and complying the quality standards. The ambient air quality, the monitoring is a systematic and long-term assessment of pollutant levels by measuring the quantity, because types of certain pollutants in surrounding available, that is outdoor air. The next one is ambient air monitoring is an integral part of effective air quality management. The ambient air quality monitoring, air modeling for air quality assessment, it is in that simple box model. We use this simple box model as atmospheric dispersion model, which can be used to calculate the concentration of the ground level contaminants of the air, specific air pollutants by concern emitting from the project activity of developmental activity. The image showing the box model, the emissions from the construction activities and emissions from the traffic, emissions from the industrial activities and forest fires and any other source of the air pollution that will quantify in this simple box model. Next, air quality impact assessment. Air quality impact assessment, three types: no significant change and significant change and the precautions. First one, no significant change. When continuous monitoring to examine the air quality and situation and trends of the air quality in the specific area, project area, there is no significant change. Next, significant change. If any significant impact measured, we need to take the prevention and mitigation measures to implement in project activity and in EIA report process. Next, the precaution. The air quality generally not include emergency emissions, unpredictable, but it can be prepared necessarily as emergency before starting the project. The characteristics of air quality. Different sources of air pollutants classified into fixed sources, including industries, factories, manufacturing units, workshops, engineering workshops, ventilation towers, and mobile sources, motor vehicles, and aircrafts and ships. These sources impact the quality of air generally, as air pollutants carried out and spread in the air itself. The air quality greatly influenced by the sources of the factories, industries, and other developmental activities in the location area, project area, greatly influenced by the source and conditions in the area where the pollutants are carried. It depends on the direction of the wind and depends on the velocity of the air. The quality of the air impact on humans will vary according to the pollutants in the specific area. It will impact the humans broadly, chronic and acute effects. There is a need to examine this air quality in the perspective of environmental impact assessment and the human health. In both human environment and human health and environmental impact assessment perspective. And nitrogen oxides and suspended particulate matters and environmental impacts on air quality also impact the quality, nitrogen oxide and suspended particulate matters. And different dioxins. When open burning occurred, if any plastic material and any hazardous material present in the waste materials, the burning process releases dioxins, benzene, and other hazardous substances into the environment that will impact the quality of the air of the location. Different short-term and long-term effects on human health. The forecast sources of nitrogen oxides and suspended particulate matters that will impact the quality, the air pollutants impact the quality, the quality of the air built up with many months, years. It depends on the local conditions and it required the accuracy. So when assessing the air quality, required choose a most appropriate method to determine the EIA, there are many sources and different components we consider in the EIA methodology process related to air quality. In that, assessing air pollution sources. First one, the air quality testing helps to identify the sources of air pollution, the potential air sources associated with the proposed developmental activity impact the air pollution, air quality by measuring pollutant concentrations and identifying the potential sources of the pollution that provides in assessment valuable insights and potential impacts of an air quality in the project area. This information is essential for understanding the quality of the air, quality of the air conditions, and predicting project conditions and contribution in the air pollution of the particular project. The next one is the quantifying pollutant emissions. Air quality testing enables the quantification of pollutant emissions from a proposed project. Through emissions, measurements and modeling techniques, different modeling techniques to minimize the emissions. Releasing the pollutants into the environment that minimize the pollutants into the environment, into the atmosphere. This information is crucial in EIA reports and evaluating the environmental potential impacts of the projects and also assessing the compliance with regulatory authorities. The authorities given standards and guidelines. For example, in the state pollution control board, in central CPCB, and environmental impact assessment authorities that quantify the pollutant emissions. So we should comply with the regulatory standards and guidelines. Next one is the modeling and predicting air dispersion. Dispersion, air quality testing combined with atmospheric modeling. It helps predict the dispersion of the pollutants into the environment, in the surrounding environment, by stimulating the movement of the pollutants, behavior of the pollutants in the environment. The assessment provides insights into the potential extent and spatial distribution of the pollutants the pollutants impacts on the environment and air pollution impacts. So the information, it is a vital source to understand the potential impacts and exposure of the pollutants, and especially receptors, the public sensitivity of the receptors. The receptors may be the human beings and the different animals and plants, communities, different ecosystems. And habitats. These harmful pollutants releasing into the environment. Dispersion of the pollutants in the environment concerned to the project location, project will impact the quality of the air. Next one is the health impact assessment. By measuring the concentrations of different air pollutants, particulate matter, and volatile organic compounds, and different toxic gases releasing into the environment. And the assessment evaluates the potential risks from the sources to human health. Especially, this information helps in decision making. The stakeholders involving in the environmental impact assessment process to take the decision depending on the health impact assessment and potential health impact, the consequences related to the human beings and different ecosystems will consider in EIA report making process, and it supports the development activity and appropriate mitigation measures. This health impact assessment process will support the development of the appropriate project, and it will help in mitigation measures. The next one is the designing mitigation strategies. This assessment identifies This assessment influences the specific pollutants of concern, the sources, and enabling the developmental activities and measurement of targeted control measures. The designing, the testing of air quality provide the valuable data to design effective mitigation strategy to minimize the environment's pollution source and the project environmental impacts. These measures of the project includes implementation of the pollution, the effectiveness and mitigation strategies to minimize the project impacts, And next one is the compliance with regulations. Different compliances, local, regional and national air quality regulations, and different standards established by the state and central. By quantifying the regulations of the pollution emissions and predicting the environmental impacts, these assessment helps to protect the proponents and regulators to determine the project impacts. It also provides a basic information for permitting the decisions and the development of the monitoring plan and appropriate mitigation. So, air quality testing and air quality assessment is a crucial role in environmental impact assessment. By assessing different air pollution sources and quantifying the different pollution emissions, modeling of air dispersion, and evaluating the health impacts concern the project before starting, and designing mitigation strategies and ensuring the compliance with the regulations prescribed or introduced by the authorities, central and state. By incorporating the air quality, the considerations into the EIA preparation of a concerned projects or in a EIA preparation. These can be implemented in planning, designing, this can this manner can minimize the adverse negative impacts on air quality concern the project, and it also protect the human health and the ecosystems, and this will useful to promote the sustainable development. The sustainable development is a long-term goal. By conserving the natural resources and by the protecting the natural environment, by taking mitigation measures to control the emissions into the environment, by controlling the emissions, we conserve, we protect the human health and the ecosystems. Most importantly, biodiversity, the different flora and fauna will impact with this air quality. By taking appropriate measures related to the specific project and following by the compliance with the regulations by authorities of the state and central PCBs and EIA authorities, that particular regulations and standards will help in the promotion of the sustainable development by implementing the effective environmental impact assessment of air quality. And the EIA is applicable to the all the components of the environment by studying the assessment of the EIA of the air environment and EIA of the noise environment and different biological components of the environment and socio-economic impact and human health. Human health plays an important role in sustainable development and environmental audit. All these components and regulations, standards will help in monitoring the concerned project and it will help in taking decision making process to the stakeholders of the project. Stakeholders may be component and authorities of the state and central and different expertise involved in the EIA making process. All these are help in sustainable development process. Different biological environments are available in the EIA making process. We should comply with these standards and regulations to protect the environment and the biological environment. Prediction and assessment of different impacts related to the biological environment involves a number of technical and professional considerations relative to the aspects of the pollution. The significant impacts need to identify in the EIA decision making process that will help to take the decision concerned to the project and as well as noise environment, different standards maintaining by the authorities, different projects or manufacturing units implementing the regulations and the noise. The monitoring of the noise is a major component of the EIA. Different regulations established by the governments complying the regulations of a project or component, it is impact the decision making. While assessing the environmental impact assessment, there are acute and chronic diseases depending on the quality of the environment. All these factors impact the EIA. So now I am concluding this EIA decision making process. The quality of the air, quality of the water, and quality of the biological environment, all these are play a crucial role in environmental impact assessment, including noise environment. By assessing the pollution sources, the pollution sources may be industries, mining activities, and the construction and infrastructure development process. All these are the pollution sources. These pollution sources impact the decision making. The quantifying the emissions, particularly modeling of air dispersion and evaluating the health impacts of the air, air quality, air components, air pollutants, and different mitigation strategies to implement the protection of the environment and ensuring different compliances and regulations with the governments. The proponent or the owner of the project should implement these strategies and compliance to minimize the risks from the hazards to the environment. The implementation and minimization of the adverse impacts related to the air quality, and it impacts and it protects the human health from the different diseases. Each component of the environment, each source of the air pollution will impact the health of the public and the ecosystem. In the ecosystem involve different flora and fauna. So protecting the environment by taking appropriate measures when starting a project, we should protect the human health, we should protect the environment by taking appropriate measures, and if required any designs to minimize the emissions from the sources, we need to promote the appropriate methods to promote the sustainable development. By taking appropriate actions, the actions will change the environment positively, that can promote the sustainable development. So now I am concluding the sustainable development is depend on the actions taken by the components, proponents, and the authorities. In the next class, we will discuss on noise environment and biological environment impact on the decision making process, especially related to the environmental impact assessment preparation or project report. Thank you.